And hopefully, this is kind of my first, I guess one of the first things I've done that's kind of normal. So it's good to be here. So the first thing we want to talk about, since, we pretty much do every week, is the Miami Dolphins had another win today. Miami is 8-3. They beat the Houston Texans today, 30-15. Miami got out to a pretty big lead, 30-0 at halftime, and then kind of basically took it easy about halfway through the third quarter. They just they pulled the quarterback out of the game, and they just kind of took it easy and sat on the lead, which I don't know that I've ever seen an NFL team really do it like that. That was unique, and Houston scored some points, but wasn't really able to give themselves a chance in the game. But if you're a Dolphins fan, it was a little bit scary that, it looked like for a few minutes there, it looked like we could have a problem. So I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess I'll talk about the game first and then just big picture. So the game, look, they got another win. That's their fifth win in a row. They're 8-3. They're in great position to make the playoffs, potentially to win the division, happy with the win. The defense got some turnovers, the offense made some plays, but it's concerning. Teron Armstead gets injured. Their secondary's been banged up all year. They're still not running the ball very well. They did last week, but that's basically it, and they've had some moments throughout some of the other games, but that's been it. So their defense, if you look at the rankings, their defense isn't playing that well. They're not getting turnovers. They did in this game, but that's kind of the exception, not the rule. Okay? Their offensive line didn't look very good in big portions of this game. Some of that's Teron Armstead being out. Some of it is, I still don't know how good the offensive line is. It's been definitely better this year, but, it's hard not to be better this year, given how bad they were last year. But now Tua was a little bit off. Maybe he's a little rusty. He hasn't played in 2 weeks. He still made some plays. I was impressed with some of the stuff he did when the pocket broke down. I thought he did a good job moving around. But, big picture, I think you have to be really concerned about and when I say big picture, I don't mean necessarily next year, because in the off season you can maybe sign some free agents. You got the draft to help improve your team and try to fix different things about your team that were going wrong this year. You can also have guys get healthy and stuff like that. But I just mean bigger picture the rest of this year as far as how far can they go.
Right.
It's really concerning. Like I said, they're not running the ball well, and also, if Teron Armstead has a pectoral muscle issue, he could be out for weeks, and the season's there's only 6 weeks left. Okay, and like you were saying, football in December is a lot different than football earlier in the year. You got a lot of teams that are just fighting to stay alive, or fighting to get the best playoff seed that they can. So if you're telling me that they're not going to be able to run the ball that well, the defense is not as good as it was last year, and they're not getting turnovers. And then so they're not going to run the ball that well. And, look, if the offensive line's not going to play well, that's a serious problem, given the fact that they can't run the ball, because you've got to be able to pass protect to make some of these downfield throws, the 15, 20, 30-yard plays that they've been able to make. That's a little, that gets a little testy. And the other thing is I think people listening, they could say, well, Clark, you're overreacting. They're 8-3. Everything's good. Yeah, but do you understand how the NFL season is? They started off, they won the first 3 games, right? Everybody's like, oh, we're great. And then they lost 3 in a row. And then they've won the next 5 games. That doesn't mean that the next 6 games are going to go like the previous 5, okay, or like the rest of the season. It could be very different. Like, people may be thinking, oh, well, they just got to go. They'll just go like 4-2 the rest of the way. And I'm just like, maybe. Maybe not. You got a bunch of teams that are playing that are going to be like New England and the Jets are going to be fighting to stay alive. And that really concerns me, given that the Dolphins' offensive line isn't playing well. Okay, they play the Chargers. The Chargers are fighting for a playoff spot. Green Bay, I mean, at that point they may be totally out of it. But the Bills will be fighting for the division and for a good, a high playoff seed. So, and also some of these games are going to be up north in the cold, and that really, really concerns me. The NFL, the common saying is the NFL stands for not for long, and that's kind of the way the season works out. Like, you could be playing one way really well for a few weeks, and then you get an injury, or people kind of lock into what you're doing, and you got to be able to make adjustments. And I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. Especially with Tua, like, we've established what Tua is, basically. I mean, you need a lot of the pieces around him to be right. He's not really going to make up for the other stuff being wrong. So, anyway, go ahead. What do you think?
I agree with you on most of that. I just wrote down my notes I made. I just said, it's amazing how a win can be disappointing. And, where they won the game and they did some good things. But at the same time, there were a lot of things, especially in the second half, that, you got worried about. As soon as Armstead went out, all of a sudden Houston got like 3 sacks within the next 2 drives. Like, it dramatically, and if you've been watching this show at all, from the first episode before the season started, we talked about this, that the Dolphins, if they have injuries to the wrong people, the whole thing could fall apart. And, that kind of happened in this game. So but I'm baffled by the fact that the Dolphins had a bye week and they're somehow more injured now than they were 2 weeks ago. It's amazing. So Teron Armstead, that's the left tackle, goes out with a pectoral injury. They have Austin Jackson playing right tackle in this game for some reason. He hasn't really been playing much since the beginning of the season because he was really bad when he was in there. He wasn't good today. He got injured again. Then he went out, right? They didn't have Raheem Mostert, the running back, right? He was inactive for the game, which from what I read, it looked like he practiced a little bit on Friday, but they didn't feel comfortable playing him today. So maybe he'll be back for the next game. And then Jeff Wilson goes out of the game. I think it was in the first half, right? So they lose him. So now we have both tackles. We got, both tackles are backups. And then, running back, and then Tua starts getting hit more. All of a sudden he has one hit where it looked like, he could have really twisted himself up. And then they pull him out of the game, and I'm watching, I don't have the audio on, so I'm thinking, did they pull him out because of an injury? Like, he didn't look like he was injured, he just had a hat on the sideline. And then I thought, okay, well, they pulled him out because they have a big lead. But yeah, it's it's great. They beat Houston. Great. It's fantastic.
Houston's the worst team in the league. Like, it's not. There's no debate. They're the worst. They literally need to tear their whole roster down and rebuild it. They're terrible.
So but when the Dolphins are favored by 14 and they cover, that's pretty impressive. I can't tell you a time when the Dolphins were, we expected them to win this week like we did now. But yeah, these injuries are going to be that's a problem. If Armstead misses multiple weeks, that could be a serious issue. And the other thing is that we haven't talked about is they're entering the most difficult part of their schedule now. So going forward, let's talk about the next 3 weeks. So they're at San Francisco, at the Los Angeles Chargers, and at Buffalo. Those are the next 3 games. So I wrote down these games are the measuring stick. Like, we're going to see, like, everybody will be proven right or wrong based on what happens in these 3 games. If you love the Dolphins, you think Tua is amazing, and this is going to work out, and we should have all seen this coming, here you go. Here's your 3 games. If they play well in these 3 games, okay, then maybe you're right. But everybody who's been against this whole thing working and kind of been, this is kind of flawed, you're going to find out in the next 3 games, because these are 3 road games against 3 of the best teams in the league, and it's going to be really difficult. And honestly, like, as a Dolphins fan, I don't even really care that much about beating San Francisco next week. I just care about getting as many guys rested and healthy as we can and not getting the quarterback hurt. Because you saw, that's all it took. Armstead goes out of the game, all of a sudden Tua's getting hit a lot more. All of a sudden it started to look a little bit scary. And, I'm not trying to be judgmental. We have a fragile quarterback.
Yeah.
He just is. That's just the way it is. Like, I'm not trying to be, this isn't me making judgments here. This is just, look at the guy's career. This is kind of what you get.
And look, they need it. It's clear. I mean, I thought this before the season started. I'm like, I don't think they're done rebuilding the offensive line. They need more. They need to keep working on it to get it better. I mean, obviously, I understand that a lot of times you'll have a guy or two on an offensive line. It's like you definitely need those guys for the offensive line to be good. So they need Teron Armstead. But, I mean, I just think the offensive line was so bad last year, they need to keep either draft more guys or see who's available. Because, people can say, well, it's just the offensive line. I mean, that's real. I mean, when the offensive line was bad for the Chiefs, they had problems. And that's the Chiefs, okay?
Right.
They had problems in the Super Bowl. I mean, they couldn't compete. Okay, so it almost doesn't matter who your quarterback is. If your offensive line is going to be bad, you're going to have a lot of problems, and they don't have a running game to fall back on. I mean, people can say, "Oh, they ran well last week," and there's been moments throughout the season. Yeah, but most of those moments are they're running to the outside or they're running off the tackle. They can't just line up and run right up the middle. Okay, they don't have that kind of offensive line. They've shown that they don't have that offensive line.
They're playing the 31st defense in the NFL today, and they got sacked 4 times. They gave up 4 sacks. I mean, so it just shows that wow, like this is teetering on the edge. So, so we'll see what happens. I mean, like I said, this is going to be a huge. The next 3 weeks will decide a lot. But I thought it was interesting. We didn't get to talk about this, but where the conversation on Tua has gone now, to where guys like Keyshawn Johnson are now on board with Tua. People who didn't believe in him are now having to change their minds and say, oh, wait a minute, and there was a really good montage on YouTube of all the people doubting Tua and then showing all of his highlights this year. And I find it interesting to where it's gone now. The Tua detractors, or the people who don't think he's going to be great, are saying things like, well, once they get to cold weather, once they have to play in cold weather, that's the end of it. What I just find hysterical about that is that was 3 months ago. That was not what the conversation was. The conversation was, can this guy play at all in the NFL?
Yeah.
and now that he's proven the guy is a capable starter and he's better than I thought he would be, at this point anyway. Now it's, well, he can't do this. So now it's the moving of the goalposts.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's interesting, but I mean, and I will say that like my take on Tua is that he's a capable quarterback when what you have around him is correct. When the offensive line's good and you've got a good play caller, and like I thought it was interesting. I guess you didn't have the audio on, so to Tua's in Tua's defense for the previous 2 years. During the game, one of the commentators was talking about Tua didn't know the first 2 years that like the depth of your drop is connected to the route that you're trying to throw to. Okay, now you can blame him for not knowing that, and I guess to an extent maybe, but I also think that shows that the offensive coaching that he was getting the first 2 years with the Dolphins was bad, and I think it's much better this year. Not just in terms of McDaniel instilling confidence in him, but I think they know what they're doing, and so that's been proven. That's shown that Tua can be a capable quarterback when what you have around him is good. And what I'm concerned about over the next month and a half is I don't know that what the rest of what's around him is good enough at this point because of injuries, mainly just because of injuries, really.
Yeah, I think, I definitely think they need, I think any quarterback needs, they definitely need to be supported, but I think you have to remember where the Dolphins are coming from to where they are now.
Right.
We talked about, like, they had really substandard offensive talent up until now. Their offensive line was terrible. And so, he definitely needed all of that to succeed. And look, the first 2 years, I thought that I was shocked. I thought Tua was I couldn't believe he was that bad. I was like, there's no way this guy is this bad. I just thought it was crazy how bad he was. And then this year, I am just impressed with how good this has gone. I didn't see this. I just didn't see this this kind of efficiency coming. But it comes and it goes because of, their lack of the consistent running game, like we talked about. And the offense really only scored 16 points today. They got a defensive fumble recovery, and then they got an interception that gave them the ball on the 2-yard line. Otherwise, they really only generated one touchdown on their own against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So we'll see how it goes. I don't think any of the teams that they're playing. I watched San Francisco and the Chargers play today, and they have their own issues to deal with. So
and the other thing I'll say is that I'm saying that Tua needs to have the stuff be right around him. For the most part, there's 20 other quarterbacks in the league who need things to be really right around them for them to be the best that they can be. That they can be, not just the best, whatever, So, and even to an extent, Mahomes has one of the best play callers in the history of the league, and he's got a bunch of talent on offense, So, like, even Mahomes needs to, and, Josh Allen, he's got a bunch of talent at wide receiver. And they've got a bunch of talent on defense. So even the very best quarterbacks need stuff around them to be right. Tua's in that group of guys that especially needs that for them to really hit what their ceiling is.